Big topics, big ideas, and practical policy solutions. This is Leaders on the Frontier with your host, David Leese.
Well, hi, everybody. It's great to see you. My name is David Leese, and of course, I'm the host of Leaders on the Frontier, and we're so glad that you could join us today for this live discussion regarding the situation in the Middle East. As we approach the date, it's October the 10th, and it's hard to believe that it's just over a year ago that we acknowledged the anniversary of the terrorist attack on Israel and the incredible tragedy of those events that came out of that attack and where we are at today in 2024. So we're going to be talking about that, and we've got a very special guest who will be joining us in a moment. But I wanted to, before I get into that topic with you, I just wanted to thank you for you, the audience, for joining us and for the kind of feedback and comments and encouragement that we receive from you. We're always delighted to hear your comments. There's been a lot of feedback from people right across the country and certainly other parts of the world. And we are very thankful for that as we look to this upcoming Monday in Canada, where we celebrate and pause and are thankful for so many things. So perhaps that's a question to you, is what are you thankful for? I am certainly thankful from my perspective for my family, my wife and my children, as well as our community, and of course our incredible nation, Canada. It's not to be taken for granted, and I think that is very apropos as we think about what we are thankful for today, as we think about how we continue to build our country and again, not take it for granted. So I am trying to say to you, happy Thanksgiving to each and every one of you. And, I just hope you have a wonderful time together with your family wherever you are. So today we are going to talk about a very challenging topic. It has different layers of complexity. And you'll know that we have got, on this day, it's just past the 1-year anniversary mark of the terrorism attack by Hamas on Israel. We know about the incredible number of persons killed, as well as persons taken hostage, and then the whole myriad of actions that followed up on that. And it is, this topic is not for the faint of heart, as we say, but it has huge implications, not only in the case of Israel, but also as it relates to a regional conflict in the Middle East. As you know, it's not just simply about Hamas or Hezbollah as we look at Lebanon, or the Houthi as we think of Yemen, but also in Iran. And then it's interesting how those events have cascaded across the world, particularly into Canada and our domestic scene and what's happening there as we have debates about what we should be doing as a nation. So please join us. And I notice that we have a number of hellos from various people across the country, including Prairie. Good afternoon to you, and we're very glad that you could join us again. So in order to help put us to gain perspective on this issue, I'm going to welcome Dr. Philip Salzman. And we're so glad that Philip could join us, because Philip is certainly an expert. He's an anthropologist. He was a professor of anthropology at McGill University. He's a senior fellow at Frontier, very thoughtful author and writer. And so I want to welcome Philip to the program. Welcome, my friend, Philip Salzman.
Thank you, David. I'm very pleased to be here.
And Philip, It's actually kind of emotional to welcome you because it's almost a year ago that we started this live broadcast, and you were the first guest. And we talked about this, obviously, this very same topic. So it's really something to see you again almost a year later.
Yes.
So, Philip, I think one of the things that struck me about our conversation about a year ago was your perspective. You obviously are an anthropologist, but you have spent a tremendous amount of time in the Middle East and you know this region well. And so, can you help us understand more the basics of what is going on here with this terrible conflict? And I know one of the seminal insights that you had, as I recall, was that this is a religious war. Can you help refresh our minds around what you mean by that?
I would love to discuss it. Before I go into the substance, though, I think folks watching have a right to know how I know what I'm going to claim I know. I'm a cultural anthropologist, and the job of cultural anthropologists is to study cultures around the world. And how we do that, our methodology, if you will, is to go out and live among a people that we want to know more about, and through getting to know them, come to know their culture in more detail. My first big research was in Iran, in southeastern Iran, in Baluchistan, with a nomadic tribe called the Yaramadzai, who lived in tents and raised camels and sheep and goats and migrated around their large desert territory. I lived with them for over 3 different periods for 28 months. So I think it's fair to say I have a reasonable understanding of them. And they're very like the Bedouin. They don't speak Arabic, but otherwise they're exactly like the Bedouin. And the Bedouin, of course, are the foundation block, cultural foundation block of the Arab world. So that gave me insight not only into Baluchistan, but also into the Arab world.
So that's actually fascinating background, Philip, as I recall, because I think you've told me a little bit about this, is that you lived for some time with this incredible tribe within Iran. So that really helped shape your real perspective, both as an academic, but as a person into the peoples of this area.
What you do is you talk to people, you talk to them. It helps to know their language, by the way, which is not easy, but I learned Persian and then Baluchi in order to be able to speak with them. And they will tell you a lot of things. They will also tell each other things. And it's very important to listen to what they tell each other. And of course, you're there and you're watching what they do. So they say things and then they do things. And you get to see how well those fit together. A word of caution. The least reliable information is what they tell you. They tell you who they are and what they intend. That may be to shape your attitude. It may be to please you. It may be to get you to help them. It may be for you to be on their side. But what they tell you may not be what they really believe or what they're really doing. You have to watch what they say to each other. what they say to each other might not be frank and accurate either, but it's their real life. And so you get a much better idea of what's going on from the discourse among them. And you also have to watch what they do, because it doesn't always correspond to what they say. So you have to look through all of that material in order to try and decide what the situation is.
Interesting. So, Dr. Salzman, if I'm understanding your point, then culture matters when it comes to understanding this war that is going on in the Middle East.
Well, culture is a way of life. And if you understand the way of life of these folks and what their intentions are, and what they hope to do, and what their goals are, what their values are, then you can better understand the events that arise out of those things.
Okay. So, as an anthropologist and as you're a keen analyst of the Middle East, among other political situations in our world, what really happened on October 7 about a year ago? What was that? It was obviously a terrorism attack, but what does that represent then in terms of the culture and this as a religious war?
Well, for Hamas is one of a number of organizations that have as their specified goal to destroy Israel. Hamas goes farther. It says it wants to destroy the Jews, all the Jews around the world. Now, this goes farther. Let me put it this way. They do so, they believe, because Jews violate the basic principles of Islam, and they do not respect Islam. They do not respect the supremacy that Islam demands. Now, Jews and Christians have a particular status within Islam. They're not infidels. Because they're people of the book. And this is the way Islam has acknowledged what it's borrowed from Jews and Christians in the way of doctrine and the way of ancestors and so on. And instead of being an infidel, they are regarded as Dima. Dima means protected, but in practice, it means dependent, fifth class, and always subject to the authority of Muslims. This is the Islamic framework. So these other groups, Hamas specifically in its founding charter says that it wants to destroy Israel and it wants to kill all Jews around the world. That really goes farther than traditional Islamic doctrine does. And you don't want to be, it's better than being an infidel, being a Dima, because infidels can be killed or enslaved or pretty much anything legitimately within Islam. So these groups, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they all are devotees to Islamic supremacy. And they let you know by their names. Hamas is an acronym actually. In the Arabic words that it represents are the Islamic resistance movement. Its fellow organization in Gaza is the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. Jihad means holy war. Hezbollah also makes reference to religion, the very name. So all of these folks are motivated to reestablish Islamic supremacy. And they're doing so in the context of a very unusual circumstance. In the past, Jews were subservient to Muslims. For ever since the establishment of Islam in the 7th century, until the establishment of Israel in the Middle East, Jews were subservient to Muslims. And they had to obey them. They had to pay them in order not to be killed. They were ritually humiliated annually when they paid their dues. And they had many restrictions on their lives. With the establishment of Israel, something unheard of happened. And that is that Arab armies and Arab Muslim armies were defeated by Jews. And as Israel gained strength, it fought a number of other wars, all started by the Arabs, and defeated them every time. This is very humiliating for a culture that arises from the Bedouin. Arab men see themselves as warriors because all Bedouin males are warriors, and to be defeated repeatedly by the most despised people within your realm is terribly shameful and something that they would love to change.
Okay, so this story and background is, dare I say, quite foreign to almost all Canadians. It certainly is for me. I would pretend to only have a basic superficial knowledge of this cultural background. But it's just fascinating background. So I am talking with Dr. Philip Salzman, an anthropologist, former professor at McGill, a senior fellow at the Frontier Center for Public Policy. And we're talking about the aftermath of October 7 and, of course, the larger situation of the Middle East. So I welcome, again, any questions that you have from the audience. And hello, Matt, as well. We have a very interesting opportunity then to explore this topic. And it is really quite challenging because we think of all the, frankly, death and destruction that's happened this past year. It's almost overwhelming. But I think what's interesting is that October 7 then, if we listen carefully to what you just talked about, Dr. Salzman, is that October 7th just did not come out of the blue. It's really out of a long historical context of these cultures and a religious war. And in fact, I think it's interesting you reference these groups as really devout Islamic, what did you call it, supremacists. Is that right?
Well, that's the official Islamic doctrine that Muslims must dominate. And particularly in the case, there's a specific doctrine that any geographical area that had been conquered and ruled by Muslims can never be lost to Islam. And of course, prior to the establishment of Islam, Arabs lived in Arabia. They didn't live in the Levant. They didn't live in the Holy Land. They didn't live in Lebanon, and so on. There was following the establishment of Islam, there was a a huge imperial expansion led by Bedouin tribes that conquered in the east all the way to India, in the west all the way to Morocco, and then from Morocco north to Spain uh, and even parts of Italy. So there was a huge expansion. In fact, uh, uh, Muslim Islamists, people who take the political part of Islam seriously, they see uh, Spain and Portugal and Sicily as lands that belong to them because they had once conquered there, and that in the future they hope to take them back. So this is a general principle of Islam that lands cannot be lost to Islam, and so the Jews have violated that by taking even this tiny little sliver of the Middle East for their own and not dominated by Muslims.
Okay. So just to clarify then, and it's, I certainly don't want to generalize because obviously, as someone who has a number of friends who are of the Muslim faith, there's a variety of perspectives, but this particular group of Islam looks at Israel in a particular way that they don't see them as coexisting. They don't believe that Israel has a right to exist. Period. Am I simplifying this too much? When they chant Israel death, to the sea, that means they do not see a future of coexistence. Period. Is that right?
No, they want to get rid of Israel because it violates its most basic their most basic religious commitments.
Okay, because I think for many Canadians, it's kind of hard to wrap our heads around this because we'd like to believe that we can all coexist peacefully, and so that kind of brings us to where we're at today. Over the last year, we've seen the Prime Minister of Israel obviously lead a coalition war government, a coalition within his own nation, to really prosecute a war against Hamas to utterly defeat it. I mean, I think that we've all seen the determination and focus. It's really been quite astounding that they're prosecuting a war to get rid of Hamas. Is that the objective as you've understood it?
Yes, it is the objective of Prime Minister Netanyahu, but it's also the public opinion is in Israel supports the destruction of Hamas.
Yes. And so I think that's where it seems like there's been kind of three groups of people, and I want to test this out, and it's kind of based on a column recently done by Lord Conrad Black, who basically says, it seems like there's three groups or three responses then to Israel's response to this terrorist attack. One has been to suggest that Israel should not exist. Obviously, that any response is inappropriate and Israel should be taken out. Obviously, and even despite the fact that Israel has been in that spot now for some 5,000 years. But then the second group appears to be one that says that Israel has the right, given all the above, where parties don't believe it has a right to exist. Israel has the right, in fact, to reply and take out Hamas as any enemy would. So that's a second group. The third group is somewhere in between. It's kind of caught in a moral quandary where Israel is justified to defend itself, but not to prosecute a war to wipe out an enemy that has sworn to take it out. So, is that kind of a fair grouping of the three responses here? I mean, it almost seems absurd, but is that essentially the three categories here of responses to Israel now?
I think there are a wide range of responses. I think there are people who want peace and who hate this fighting, hate the destruction, hate the killing of anybody, and there's a specific group in Israel that above all wants to get its relatives and friends who are being held hostage home and are prepared to make sacrifices in terms of geopolitical goals. In other words, not to destroy Hamas if they can get the hostages back.
Indeed, yes.
Which the government does not agree with, and the majority does not agree with, of Israelis. I think there are people who, in the West, there are many people today who have accepted, I think, a Marxist framework that's incredibly misleading. It begins with the class conflict between oppressors and oppressed, and it goes on to taking up Lenin's model of imperialism, and this is a theory that's very popular in Western universities called post-colonial theory. And the argument, in effect, is that all the bad things in the world are the result of European imperialism. This is the most unhistoric and dumb theory to totally be taken up in all the social sciences and humanities. All the world has seen imperialism. The Arabs are where they are because of Arab Muslim imperialism. China is where it is because of Chinese imperialism, and so on. So to say that the evil in the world is the result of Western imperialism and colonialism is, well, everywhere else is peace and beauty and environmental justice, is just nonsensical. It's also absurd to apply it to a group of people who, although they've been on a long vacation elsewhere, are the indigenes of Palestine. That is the Jews. When the Romans came to conquer Israel, the Arabs were in Arabia. They found only Jews, and they fought Jews for a century and a half, and they finally beat them. And then they exiled many of them. But the Romans knew who the indigenes were. They didn't like them much, and they They didn't treat him very well, but they knew him. And in all the Roman documents, that's what you find. So as indigenes, it's a little hard to be imperialistic. So this model has been taken up. It's been applied elsewhere. It's been applied. Feminists have applied it, saying that men are oppressors, and it's been applied. It's been applied to race and to sexuality. But I will say that perhaps the most ludicrous application of it, however much it may or may not apply to race in North America, the idea that Israelis are white oppressors and Palestinians are people of culture who are victims of Israel is ridiculous. No one who's ever been there could say that. Well, no one who can see with their eyes. The Palestinians and Jewish Israelis have a lot of DNA in common, and many Jewish Israelis are linguistically Arab speakers because they came from Arab countries, and
Gosh.
then there are the Ethiopian Jews, the Indian Jews, all people of color, of course. So this is, again, I mean, it's the attempt by some North American activists to apply a North American racial conflict in Israel is absurd, but it gets you a lot of support.
Okay, so this is, gosh, you're kind of peeling back the layers here, and it is kind of an absurd situation and a very tragic situation when you think of the violence and the loss of death and how people are just in this almost intractable conflict. So let's just kind of summarize this a little bit, because what I think you've also pointed out, Dr. Salzman, is there's another perspective that has kind of come out of the bowels of the universities in many cases. I mean, you know the story very well. This Marxist perspective that says that all things colonial have been evil, and that the Israel is an oppressor. They are oppressing the Arab people, and hence they should be wiped off the face of the map, so to speak. And so it's strange. There's this kind of alliance then between radical, what did you refer to them as Muslim supremacists, namely like Hamas and that ilk, with parties that come out of these universities that espouse diversity, equity, and inclusion. Is that kind of what you're getting at? Is that they're kind of on the same page now?
Well, some people call it the Red-Green Alliance.
The Red-Green Alliance,
Yeah, the
indeed.
communists, socialists, and communists, and green is the color of Islam. And so, yes, there's an alliance between the people who want to establish in the ideal of political Muslims or of political Islam is to reestablish the society that existed under Muhammad. That was the purest society. So these folks are so conservative that they want to go back to the 7th century. Then you have the communists and socialists who are imagining a utopia that they want to put into place, in which everybody is equal and everything is easy.
So, Dr. Salzman, in that context, how would that practically work? Because I know this sounds very crass, but if you brought together the group of alphabet coalition, like the LGBTQ, I'm not even sure what the entire number of other acronyms are, but if you brought them together with the radical Islamists who are supremacists, how does that work peacefully? I mean, I would think that all the radical, supremacists on the Muslim side would promptly throw all those other parties on the LGBTQ side over the roof. I mean, obviously, there's no tolerance whatsoever for anything that they stand for. So, like, don't people recognize that?
Uh, was it Lenin or was it Stalin that talked about the useful idiots in the West that were uh, that were that were working for the communists?
Mm-hmm.
And so certainly Muslims are happy to accept um, allies who uh, oppose their enemies, who oppose Israel, who oppose the United States and Canada. You've seen in these demonstrations, they don't just stop with burning Israeli flags. They burn American flags. They burn Canadian flags.
Mm-hmm.
They don't just chant uh, from the river to the sea, uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, Palestine will be free. What are they free of? They're free of Jews. That's the idea. Uh,
Wow.
they don't just stop at that. They say, uh, destroy Canada, destroy America.
Mm-hmm.
So all of the uh, uh, all of these folks can come together and agree on the destruction of the enemies of radical Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we know that in practice, they wouldn't be able to live together. We know that um, uh, most of the um, uh, LGBTQ, 2S, et cetera, uh, are illegal and outlawed in most Arab countries.
Mm-hmm.
That in Gaza, uh, they're thrown off of roofs. In Iran, they're hung on cranes in public squares. So we know what happens in practice uh, in those places. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, these people are all coming together in North America at an ideological level uh, to hate the same thing, uh, to hate the West, to hate democracy, to hate Israel, the United States, and Canada.
Mm-hmm. No, it's hard to wrap one's head around. So we know that in terms of news headlines this past Monday, a Vancouver rally celebrated the October 7 terrorist attacks against Israel, and they included chants of death to Canada and a burning of the Canadian flag. So this has prompted obviously a pledge by different political leaders in Canada, including the federal leader of the opposition, Mr. Poilievre, and of course the leader of the BC Conservative Party, John Rustad, to call for the group that has been organizing this, and pardon the pronunciation, the Samadun, to label them as a terrorist group in Canada, to basically outlaw them. So do you know anything about the Samadun as a group?
Yeah, they're affiliated with the uh, uh, Palestinian Islamic Jihad group in Gaza, and have been part of them and worked with them and brought their people here to Canada, where they've been welcomed. Samadoun is not only legal but is is listed as a charity, so it doesn't have to pay any taxes, which is a nice privilege to give a pro-terrorist group.
So it's a very significant group that's networked into, I believe it's called the Popular Front of Palestine. So it begs a lot of serious questions regarding that suggestion by various political leaders to actually ban it as a terrorist group in Canada. So we'll wait to see what happens. But the point is, when parties burn the Canadian flag, it begs a lot of serious questions. Why are they doing this? As we just opened off this program by saying we are thankful for this country, for its rights and freedoms. And I think what's so ironic is that within so many of these radical Islamic countries, a number of these participants in these protests would, as you said, last basically a minute and would be thrown promptly off a roof. So I just, it's a puzzling kind of coming together of an alliance, as you say, between the so-called red or radical left and the green, the radical Muslims. So it is truly a head scratcher. So who would ever believe that would emerge given this past year? And I think so that turns our attention then to the responses within certainly North America, in Canada. I mean, I think we've seen a lot of fascinating similar protests on various university campuses. So this so-called Red-Green Alliance, does that help explain why you would have these kinds of protests at various universities? We've seen them at McGill, Concordia, right across the country. Why are they happening at universities, Dr. Salzman? Is there an easy answer for that?
Well, part of the part of excuse me, part of the whole ideology of universities these days draws heavily on the Marxist model.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the departments and courses are based on that model. We call them grievance fields: feminist studies, Black studies, Hispanic studies, and so on, which are primarily organized as resistance programs, and that's what they teach. And more and more students have taken those kinds of programs and are committed to this model of conflict between people who they view as oppressors.
Okay, so in other words, from your perspective, the emergence of so-called grievance studies, which are really all about cultural Marxist studies, this constant reference to oppressor versus oppressed, really doesn't make these protests on universities a surprise to you in your mind. Is that right?
Well, as I said, this whole theory, this is also wrapped up in the post-colonial theory, which blames everything on the West and justifies rejecting everything Western, because now nothing is taught about the West in universities. It used to be they would teach about Canadian history, they would teach about American history, Canadian Constitution, American Constitution. They don't teach any of that anymore. That's reject that. You're not allowed to teach that now. So they've rejected all of the West, and Israel just happens to fit. They simply fit that into the into the Marxist model, into
Mhm.
the post-colonial theory model, and make it into colonial settlers,
Mhm.
just like Canadians. The difference is Canadians really did come from elsewhere, whereas um, Jews were going home to Israel.
Mhm.
But they ignore that. In fact, they deny that. They deny that Jews ever had anything to do uh, with that area,
Mhm.
and that it always belonged to Arabs who in truth simply weren't there until the 7th century.
Mhm. Okay, so what you're getting at, though, Dr. Salzman, is that it raises a lot of very profound questions about not only the emergence of really radical groups within the Middle East, and hence this conflict, but also within our domestic scene within Canada, and how it's not a surprise that they are burning the Canadian flag, because obviously they do not appear to be in support of those basic founding principles that we have as a nation, like what is it again? Oh yeah, tolerance, and basically an ability to have healthy, respectful conversation. That's not who they are. They really want to see the end of Canada among just,
They have
it's not
to.
just the end of Israel, right?
They have to have integrity. You have to fight against a country that's based on an original sin,
Hmm.
the original sin of being colonial settlers and
Hmm.
of engaging in genocide against the local people who are the only ones that have a right to that place.
Okay,
So
because it's very interesting. I'm having this conversation with Dr. Philip Salzman, a senior fellow at Frontier. He's also an anthropologist. I was a professor at McGill University, and it's interesting. We've got a number of comments, certainly from the audience. We welcome your questions and very much appreciate your participation. It's interesting. There was a column in the National Post this past week by Joe Adam George, and the headline was "Extremism is the New Normal in the Streets of Trudeau's Post-National Canada." And I think what he meant by the column was, in this country where we have a post-national reference to Canada, we don't have a unifying set of principles. So anybody can come in and not be unified with those basic liberal, classical liberal principles of respect for individual rights and freedoms, a right for those kinds of principles. And now we have almost alien groups coming in and are really coming out of our universities, of all things, when they should be upholding these principles. Instead, they're nurturing a whole group of people that have principles that are incompatible with a free and democratic society. Is that where we're going in this conversation, Dr. Salzman? Is that the upshot of where we're headed?
many of the people in universities are Canadians. There are many that are not, and it's a question whether they should be there. But there are many who are Canadians. Children of Canadians have adopted these anti-Canadian views, uh, and
And
uh,
sorry, why would you say they are anti-Canadian from your perspective?
well, when they're saying "death to Canada" and burning the flag, that would
Hmm.
appear to be pretty evident. But uh, uh, they definitely and they denounce the country as being genocidal colonial settlers.
Hmm.
And you have now some politicians who are trying to give all the land back to the First Nations.
Okay.
Uh, we've seen that in British Columbia,
Hmm.
and that's going to be a matter of discussion, I think, in the next days. Uh, But Canadians don't want this. Canadians do not want.
Hmm.
They like the idea of multiculturalism in the sense of people coming from anywhere to become Canadians.
Mm-hmm.
They do not support the idea of people coming here to carry on their own culture, their own language, their own disputes in Canada. They don't
Hmm.
want that. They've made that specific, explicit in opinion polls.
Indeed.
So
Yeah.
they're welcoming, but they expect people to become Canadians.
Exactly. Yeah. So let's be clear here. In Canada, we are unified by these important principles that bring us together, and I think that was the brilliant vision of our first Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, that we were unified regardless of our background, our race, that we were unified by principles as Canadians, and that that's one of the brilliant parts of this nation. And yet now we have kind of an alien ideology that is not in harmony with that unity. So I think that that's a brilliant point, that multiculturalism, if it means siloing off each other and not in unity, is kind of a farce, isn't it? Multiculturalism doesn't work then.
Look, the problem in universities has partly been a result of the federal government's policy. This is the Trudeau government's point of view that Canada does not have a common culture,
Hmm.
that we are not a people.
Hmm.
We are a political arrangement with no heart.
Okay.
And he has imposed on universities this whole framework of uh, DEI,
Hmm.
diversity, equity, and inclusion, which in reality, all of those terms are in practice the opposite of what you think they are.
Hmm.
Diversity means uh, diversity of skin color, uh, and of cultural background and of sexuality, but not of opinion. No,
Hmm.
no diversity of opinion is allowed anymore in universities.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
people can't argue about things. People can't present evidence for different things. Uh, the it has totally undermined universities and and has encouraged this kind of political activity. In fact, the replacement of research and scholarship by political activism, which is
Hmm.
where our universities have come. And foreign interests represented by foreign students uh, have played a significant part in this. There are uh, Islamic groups, Middle Eastern groups in every university that lobby in favor of foreign countries and in favor of the goals of those of Islamic radicals.
Yeah. So very good point. So what's fascinating here, I think, in our conversation then, Dr. Salzman, is October 7th. That incredible historical tragedy has unfolded this past year and has revealed quite significant issues then, not just in the Middle East as it relates to Hamas, Hezbollah, and of course Iran, the large regional player there that's kind of behind a lot of this. But it's also revealed cracks within our own society that really need to be woken up and exposed. I mean, I think what you've just outlined about universities there is a Greek tragedy. I mean, why are universities being funded by taxpayers if in fact they're teaching what I would frankly call this whole oppression or grievance studies? They're really intellectual frauds. They should really be defunded, shouldn't they?
I think our universities need a redo.
A redo. Or they should just, yeah. Anyways, I know there's a lot of good things about university, but this is a train wreck. They're actually undermining our own society.
Absolutely, they are, and at the instigation of the government, which is truly shocking.
It really is shocking. So what do you think, audience? I mean, this is crazy. I've got a comment from Norwood Cooper who says, so Trudeau is giving jihad terrorist group taxpayers money? Well, indirectly, I guess, if you refer to charitable status, I have known that Trudeau was going to go along with the globalists. They want Canada. This is a rich country in resources. I don't know. What do you think about that comment by Norwood Cooper, Dr. Salzman? That it sounds like there's a lot of interest here that frankly do not want to see Canada as a strong, independent nation, but they're happy to use our resources.
Globalists have one thing in mind: their power over everybody. They want an international government that they're in charge of, and you've heard them say, "You will own nothing and you will be happy." Presumably because they're going to own everything.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's certainly a very thoughtful comment, Norwood, and we really appreciate it. I also wanted to note that when it comes to this regional conflict, Israel is pursuing their objectives in a full focused manner that clearly they are intent on winning. And it's very clear that their goal is to free Lebanon from Hezbollah, full stop, period. And now that Iran has attempted to attack Israel with numerous missiles, and that was stopped successfully, I guess the question I would have is, and I know none of us have a crystal ball, but is Israel then justified to look at responding in kind and actually, frankly, destroying so many things in that awful regime called Iran that so many people in Iran don't support? But would they be justified, do you think, Dr. Salzman, in hitting back at Iran and just taking out that nuclear program? I mean, that's a very concerning matter, isn't it? That there are nuclear weapons that are being built within Iran.
Iran refers to Israel as a one-bomb country, referring to nuclear bombs. It's a one-bomb country. They don't like to hear that, as you can imagine. I'd like to say a word about, I talked about what the radical Islamic groups want. But I'd like to talk about what Israelis want. Israelis from the beginning have wanted peace. They've wanted to be left alone. These are people who came out of the Holocaust. They want to be left alone in peace. That's their goal. They've thought from the beginning they could have peace with their Palestinian neighbors. They could help each other. They could develop the land together, and they've looked for peace partners among the Palestinians from the beginning. And over the years, they've made numerous offers to Palestinians for a Palestinian state and peace with Israel, as long as they accept Israel as a Jewish state.
Indeed.
They've refused every single one of those. And so what they're doing now, Hamas and Hezbollah exist in order to destroy Israel. They're not a people. They're terrorist organizations and have been designated so by most Western countries. Uh, and uh, uh, so Israel doesn't want to destroy the people of Lebanon or the people of Gaza. He wants to destroy the terrorist organizations that are trying to destroy it. It's purely defensive. Iran is committed theologically to to the expansion to the conquest of the world by Shia Islam. Uh, and Israel is the first bite for it, and bite-sized conquest for uh, uh, for Iran, which is a large country. Iran is a small country, uh, and so all Israel is trying to do is to uh, destroy people trying to destroy it.
Okay. So, and I think further to your point, Dr. Salzman, the larger perspective of the neighbors around Israel, if you look at its Arab neighbors, have that same vision of living in peaceful coexistence. I think of Jordan, I think of Egypt. There's so many others that want to share that vision of building the prosperity of their country and thriving. But you have these outliers. Is the real source of this problem related to the radical Shia regime that governs Iran? Is that like they're the active funders behind Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis? Is that really the cornerstone of this problem?
Absolutely, and the uh, the Arab countries have warmed up to Israel because they see Israel as a partner that can be a barrier against the imperialism of Shia Iran.
Indeed. And I think I was really personally quite excited about in 2020 the Abraham Accords, which really created, I thought, a brilliant diplomatic solution for peace in the Middle East. But it seems like there's been so many parties, including Iran, that obviously don't want to see those Abraham Accords go forward. Is that kind of a seminal issue there?
Well, the Biden-Harris administration in the U.S. Has kind of disdained the Abraham Accords as it was the work of Trump, and so they've never said that word, that phrase, Abraham Accords, ever.
Yeah, when in fact it was a massive breakthrough.
And they haven't. They didn't want to give him the credit for that, what in fact was a great achievement. But it did rest, as I was trying to suggest, on the Sunni Arab fear of Shia Iran and its imperial ambitions.
Okay. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our conversation with Dr. Philip Salzman, and I guess I wanted to get at a few more remaining questions, and one of which is the whole field of foreign policy here. Because speaking of certainly the main foreign policy player in this with Israel and the region is, of course, the United States, has been the curious, position that the Biden administration has taken. It's almost like it's an Obama 2 position, where the Trump administration sought to actively isolate Iran. They imposed embargoes. They for instance, did not import their oil anymore. They basically were throttling down the Iranian regime. And before that, the Obama administration was actually taking a kind of a bizarre, from my perspective, a bizarre kind of a rapprochement approach where they were trying to make peace with Iran, and they were giving it resources. They were giving it literally hundreds of billions of dollars. And Trump stopped that, and now they went back to the Biden administration, where they have restarted that kind of approach. So why would they do that? Why would the Biden-Harris administration take that kind of approach with Iran to kind of, is that not enabling them to further create chaos in the region? Is that why October 7 even happened?
That was the Obama view, and Biden Harris, of course, follows Obama's dictates. Obama is still the strongest voice in the Democrat Party, and Obama, he had no great love for Israel. He had no great love for Jews, to be frank. He grew up in a very highly anti-Semitic church, and I think he never really was comfortable with Israel, and he saw Iran as a balance with Israel, and that stability in the region would be reached if the two were balanced against one another. They were the two strongest military regimes in the Middle East, and he wanted to see them balanced. And that's been the Biden-Harris regime's position. So they've basically freed up Iran and contributed to their economic wealth and their ability to fund all of these terrorist groups. And throughout, ever since the 7th of October of last year, they have held back Israel. Don't go. Don't do it. Stop. And whatever you've done, come back. They have discouraged Israel to the point where they've said, we will defend Israel, but that means that they will never let Israel strike their aggressors. So their aggressors will live to the next October, and the next October, and the next October the 7th.
So, but this is the precipice then, this is a very historic time and a very concerning time of risk, because you truly have Israel that is determined to prosecute this war to the end and defeat Hamas and Hezbollah and ultimately Iran, period. And yet you have the United States, which is really trying to walk the line of both, quote, helping Israel, because a significant part of in this case, the Democratic base that votes for them is of the Jewish community. And then you also have the emergence of, frankly, Muslim groups in the United States now that have immigrated there that frankly are very anti-Israel. So this is almost like a schizophrenic foreign policy, it seems to me. I'm kind of being crude here, but the reality is that the United States is trying to walk the line of both helping Israel, or being seen to be, but at the same time kind of undermining it in favor of Iran. It seems to me like it's a dysfunctional foreign policy that will not deliver on any objectives. Am I being too crass?
Well, the Israelis have decided that it's not a policy that makes sense for them, and they're going to have to go ahead their own way without permission of the United States, because they're the ones that are on the line, and they cannot allow these groups that are devoted to their destruction to continue.
Indeed.
They feel that they were strategically in error by expecting these Palestinian populations to come to a point of being willing to live with Israel. They thought, we help these people enough and they improve economically, they're going to be more moderate. But all of the Palestinian public opinion organizations that test Palestinian opinion show that all Palestinians strongly approve of the October the 7th attack, and that they approve of Hamas more than they ever have, and they're ready to have Hamas lead Palestine completely. So
Indeed.
that's the situation that that Israel faces. Do we fight or do we die? That's basically the choice that they feel they have.
So this is a very concerning situation, and we certainly pray for wisdom and courage on the Israeli side and others. We hope that Arab nations can come together as well to bring reason to bear. This has also been a situation that has revealed, I believe, a certain level of, frankly, anti-Semitism in this country, as we've seen all kinds of groups, do outrageous demonstrations. I think of the one, for example, I mean, there's examples right across the country. It's really quite remarkable. So I think I would encourage Canadians to open their eyes to these issues. I think of also the curious response of our own federal government on a foreign relations point of view. What do you think, in your opinion, should the Canadian government be doing from a policy perspective in response to this situation?
Well, I mean, one question is, what do Canadians think? Do Canadians think that the government should support Israel, should support Iran, should support nobody? I mean, I think it would be nice if the government paid attention to what Canadians thought and cared about. That would be one thing. The other thing is that don't call yourself an ally if you're not ready to step in and be supportive when need be. Otherwise, what are you?
Indeed, yes. So it requires clear thinking and frankly, not just rational thinking, but moral clarity. So I've very much appreciated our conversation, Dr. Salzman. It's always a pleasure, and you've helped us put into perspective the history, the nuances regarding this as both historic conflicts, but also its religious and cultural nature. So I want to thank you very much for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you to our audience for joining us for this conversation. And we certainly welcome you to join our conversation next week on Thursday. And please share the thoughts regarding this discussion today. These are important issues that matter to not simply the people of the Middle East and Israel and others, but also to our own nation. So until next week, I want to wish you all the very best, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for watching Leaders on the Frontier. We're a nonpartisan think tank. We explore ideas, policy, and practical solutions that can make a difference in the lives of Canadians. We do not accept any government funding. We work for you. Thank you for supporting Frontier. Visit fcpp.org to give. While you're there, be sure to check out our latest articles and research. Without open discussion and debate, you're not thinking, nor are you free. Comment below. We'd love for you to join the conversation.